Said, go ahead.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Vedant. Now, you keep insisting that Israel has accepted the proposals suggested by the president on May 31 and, in fact, adopted in a UN resolution, a Security Council resolution on June 10. So can we expect that during the Secretary's visit this time around, that the Israelis will, or the Israeli Prime Minister will say he adheres to the proposal as was submitted and adopted by the United Nations?
Zaid, that is a question for the Israeli Prime Minister's office and the government of Israel, and certainly we are not spokespeople for them, and I will let them speak to whatever it is their approach is now in the immediate after days of Mr. Sinwar's death. What I can speak to is what the United States approach is, and that, Said, you heard me speak to Leon and Simon a little bit, in that for many, many, many months now, Mr. Sinwar had been the major obstacle to getting to a yes. Of course, time has passed since then, and there need to be continuing conversations that need to be had. Details as it relates to the proposal continue to need to be ironed out. And ultimately, this is a decision that only the Israelis can make and the Israeli Prime Minister can make. But what the message that the Secretary will be bringing is that a ceasefire in Gaza, one that ends the conflict, one that allows an additional influx of humanitarian aid, one that creates the conditions for the remaining hostages, including the remaining 7 American citizens, to return home. That is in the interest of the Israeli people, the Palestinian people. It is certainly in the interest of the United States and the American people, and that is what we will work collectively to pursue, but also in close coordination with partners in the region, because the day after period is also vitally important as well, to make sure that we keep the region on track so it stops getting out of these endless cycles of violence.
Yes, but since it was an Israeli proposal to begin with, you expect that the Israeli government will come out and say, this is the proposal we accept.
I'm
just asking you.
I'm not going to speculate on any announcements that may or may not come out of this trip. I, of course, have no doubt that you'll be paying attention to the Secretary's trip closely, and I will let him and or the government of Israel speak directly.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you about a massacre that took place on Saturday in Beit Lahia. 100 people were killed, maybe more, many more injured. It was mainly civilians. I know Israel liked to say, under the pretext that there were fighters there, but we have seen, by irrefutable evidence that Hamas fighters fight in 2s and 3s, as we have seen, and their leader was fighting in 2s and 3s and so on, because it is more effective and it's safer for them. So why is it so difficult for the United States of America, that has always adopted and espoused high standards on human rights and so on, why is it so difficult to condemn the massacre of civilians in this very case?
Said, when we have seen action that has impacted civilians, when we have seen actions that have impacted civilians in a disproportionate way, we certainly have spoken to it. And of course, in the context of Gaza, we have not been unambiguous about the concerns that we continue to have about its impact on civilians, both in the death toll, but also in the humanitarian impacts. And these are one of the things that we expect the Secretary to raise and continue to engage on his travels.
But you do condemn the deliberate and wanton killing of civilians, don't you?
Of course we do,
okay.
Said.
Right. Let me just follow up on this very issue. Your ally, one of your strongest allies, is Jordan. And this is what Ayman Safadi said yesterday. He said the horror Israel is bringing on the entire population of northern Gaza isn't human. It is pure evil and war crime that humanity should not tolerate. Do you agree with the Foreign Minister of Jordan, your good ally?
I've not seen Mr. Safadi's comment, Said, and certainly I'm not going to get into a public discussion or speak to private diplomatic conversations up here. What I can say is that we know that Jordan shares the United States' commitment of what we want to see for the region, which is ultimately, of course, regional stability and as well protections for civilians. We all have a strong interest in trying to create an environment in which people involved in this conflict can return to their homes and live safely and securely. Certainly, that includes the Palestinian people, and that is something that we are going to continue to work towards, and it's something that we're going to continue to work towards in close coordination with our Jordanian partners as well.
Lastly, I have on aid, please. Yeah. Now, just to follow on what Simon asked.
Yeah.
Now, your 30-day thing. I mean, Israel banned 6 organizations from getting aid into Gaza. Do you feel that Israel feels that it has this 30 days to do whatever it wants, that it can take whatever, comfort, that it can continue to prevent aid from going in? In the meantime,
Said,
you have 400,000 people that are being starved to death and now burnt to death.
Said, I couldn't speak to what Israel thinks or doesn't think. What I can speak to is the approach that the United States is taking, which is that we want to see the humanitarian situation in Gaza significantly improved, and that, of course, that 30-day thing that you're referring to, it was a letter from the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense laying out very clearly of what expectations we had and what changes that we want to see. And I'll add, it is simply just a reflection of U.S. policy. We are always going to appropriately enforce the laws that we are bound by, which is, of course, that when we have countries in which we have security relationships with, when we have humanitarian conditions as such, there are certain expectations and metrics that we need to see, and we will continue to push them to see those, and I have no doubt that the Secretary will raise this directly.